They think silence means nothing, child. They think it is empty, just the space where words should be. But let me tell you something, my silence was never empty. It was full, so full it could burst a heart. When you are young, you don't always understand what silence can hold. You think if your mother does not speak, she has nothing to say. But oh, I had too much to say. So much, I had to lock it away. Because sometimes words can destroy more than they heal, and I would not let my words become a knife against those I loved. I remember the first time. You must have noticed it. You were just a little thing, sitting there on the counter while I chopped onions. You asked me why your father no longer came home on weekends. Do you remember? Maybe you don't. You were so small. My hand paused just a second, but I didn't answer. I kept cutting faster, letting the onions sting my eyes so you would think my tears belonged to them. You watched me in silence too, but your silence was different. Yours was questioning. Mine was protecting. You see, child, silence is not one thing. It has many colors. I carried them all. There was the silence of tired bones after long days of work. There was the silence of anger, when I feared if I opened my mouth, I might spit fire. But there was also the heavy silence, the kind that settles on a house like fog. That one stayed with me the longest. And I carried it because I had to, because words would have broken the little peace we had. People outside never understood me. They called me shy, called me strange, even called me cold. But if they had sat with me long enough, if they had listened closely, they would have heard that my silence was not cold at all. It was burning. It was love and grief and fear all tangled together. You may think I wronged you with it, that I should have spoken, should have given you answers when you were young and searching. Maybe you are right, but you must also know every silence of mine was a choice. Every silence was heavy because I filled it with the words I dared not say. And now, since my bones grow weaker and the days behind me are more than the days ahead, I will break that silence for you. I will tell you the story I swallowed for so long, the story of why your mother me chose silence over speech, and why I could not give you the truth until now. Good, then sit close, child, because stories are not only in words, they are in the pauses between them too. My life, it was not an easy one, though from the outside it may have seemed ordinary enough. A small house, a family, the smell of rice cooking, the sound of rain on our tin roof. But beneath all of that, there were storms I carried quietly, storms I did not wish to let loose upon you. I was born in a village where women were taught that silence was a virtue. Speak less, obey more, that was the rule written on our hearts before we could even read. My mother, your great-grandmother, was a woman of few words herself. She would rise before the sun, her hands already busy, her mouth pressed tight. I used to watch her face and wonder if she was always thinking something she never said. Perhaps I learned from her that silence was safer than speech. When I was a girl, I loved stories. I would sit by the old tamarind tree while the elders spoke. But whenever I tried to tell a story myself, I was hushed. Don't be loud, they would say. A girl with too many words will bring shame to her family. I learned to swallow my voice. I learned to keep my thoughts tucked away like hidden letters. Then I grew, and life carried me forward like a river that doesn't ask where you want to go. I was married young. Your grandfather was not a cruel man, but he was not gentle either. He carried his own silences, his own tempers. He came home heavy with the world's weight, and I learned that my own burdens could not add to his, so I kept them inside. You see now, child, why silence became my shield. But silence can also wound, even if it is meant to protect. I know you felt it. You used to look at me with eyes full of questions. Sometimes your little lips would open, ready to ask, and then close again because you already knew your mother would not answer. That is a guilt I have carried longer than I can say. Still, I want you to understand, it was not emptiness I gave you. When I stayed quiet, I was teaching you patience, resilience, the strength to listen to what is not spoken. Maybe you did not see it then, but my silence was also love. Every time I bit back words, It was because I feared they would harm you more than help you. Every time I stayed quiet about your father's absences, it was because I did not want your heart poisoned by bitterness. And now that you are grown, now that you are sitting here beside me, I feel the time has come to let the silence crack open. I will tell you everything. My childhood, my marriage, the truths I hid, the sacrifices you never knew. Because you must carry the story forward. You must know that your mother's silence was never empty. So listen closely. Do not rush me. Stories like this are heavy, and I will give them to you piece by piece, like feeding a bird with trembling hands. Then I will begin from the beginning, child. For a story that starts in the middle is like a river without a source. You must know where I came from before you can understand where I went. I was born in a village where the fields stretched wide and the air always smelled of earth after rain. Life was simple, but it was not easy. My father worked the land with his hands until the skin was rough like bark. My mother, your great-grandmother, was the kind of woman who woke before dawn and lay down only after the house was silent. She was not cruel, but she was not soft either. She believed love was in the doing, not in the saying. So she cooked, she scrubbed, she stitched, she carried, and all the while her mouth stayed closed. I remember sitting by her feet, watching her hands move quickly through tasks. Sometimes I would ask her a question, childish questions, like why the sky was blue, or whether the moon followed me home. She would not answer, not because she didn't know, but because words were precious to her, like rice grains. She did not waste them, and when I pressed her too much, she would say, "Little girls who chatter too much lose their worth." Those words settled in me like stones at the bottom of a pond. I grew with those stones inside me. At school, I rarely raised my hand. The teacher would ask a question, and though I knew the answer, my lips would stay sealed. Other children laughed louder, spoke quicker, but I stayed small, quiet. It was not that I had nothing to say. My head was always full of thoughts, of questions, but I learned early that silence kept me safe. Words could be twisted, could bring shame, could invite punishment. Silence, though heavy, did not. And yet, child, silence was not all I knew. There were secret moments when I let my voice escape. In the evenings, when the sun had melted into the horizon and the shadows grew long, I would climb the tamarind tree behind our house. Up there, where no one could hear me, I would tell stories to the branches and the wind. I would give voices to the ants marching on the bark, to the stars blinking awake. That was my freedom, a world where I could be loud without being scolded. But when I climbed down, I locked my words away again. Then came the time when I was no longer a girl, but not yet a woman. My body changed, my duties grew, and before I could dream of anything else, I was promised to your grandfather. I had met him only once before the wedding, and even then, we barely spoke. He was taller than most men in the village, with eyes that carried a kind of restlessness. He did not smile much. I remember my hands trembling as I poured him tea, wondering what kind of life waited for me with this man whose silence was different from mine, more like a shield of pride than of fear. The wedding was noisy, drums, laughter, relatives dancing, but inside me, it was quiet. I remember looking at my mother that day, her face expressionless, and realizing she had given me no advice, no blessing, not even a whispered hope, only silence, and I understood, though it hurt. She was passing her silence into me like an inheritance. Marriage, child, that is where silence became my companion in full. Your grandfather was not a cruel man, but he carried tempers that struck like sudden storms. He believed men were to be obeyed, not questioned. If he spoke, I listened. If he fell quiet, I matched his quietness. It was the only way to keep peace, and peace, even thin and fragile, was better than war. When you were born, my heart wanted to shout, to sing, to tell the whole world that life had given me light in the form of a child. But even then, my voice stayed locked. Instead, I carried you close, pressed kisses into your hair, and let silence speak where words could not. You cried often as a baby, and neighbors would say, "This child cries too much because the mother is too quiet." They did not know that I spoke to you in my heart every moment, though my lips moved little. And then, when you grew enough to ask me questions, oh, those questions were like knives to me. You wanted to know why your father stayed away some nights, why he grew distant, why our house felt so heavy. I could not tell you the truth, not then. You were too young to carry such burdens, so I kept my silence, even though it hurt me to see confusion in your eyes. That is how silence became the shape of my loved child. Imperfect, but it was the only way I knew. Now, as I tell you this, my chest feels lighter. My silence is cracking, little by little, like ice breaking under the sun. There is more to say, so much more. But before I continue, tell me, do you have the patience to listen to a long story, one that will not be easy, but one that will explain everything?